The camera lights buzzed. The air inside the White House's Blue Room was cold, not from the air conditioning, but from the weight of the moment. Melania Trump sat across from Mika Brzezinski, the two women separated by a small, polished coffee table. The live interview was already well underway. Mika adjusted her notes and leaned forward, her expression composed but the edge in her voice unmistakable. "You are seen as one of the most private first ladies in modern history," she said. "Many Americans feel they don't know the real Melania Trump. Do you feel like you owe them more transparency?" Melania barely blinked. "I think they know me as much as they need to." Mika gave a thin smile. "But surely there is more. Many people have questioned your role in the administration. Some say you're distant, uninterested, even complicit." For the first time, Melania's head tilted slightly. Her eyes, cool, unreadable, fixed on Mika. The silence stretched just long enough to become uncomfortable. "I do what I must," Melania said simply. Mika pressed on. "Even if that means ignoring things that matter?" Melania's lips parted slightly. A breath in. "This interview is over." The broadcast cut to commercial. As the cameras powered down and the crew started moving, Mika stood. "You don't get to just walk away from questions," she muttered. Melania rose from her chair, slow and deliberate. "Some questions should not be asked," she replied, and then she walked away, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. Mika watched her go, a cold pit forming in her stomach. That night, Mika sat in her dressing room, rewatching the footage on her tablet. The way Melania had looked at her, that pause, it unsettled her. Then a sound, a gentle tap, tap, tap at her door. "Mika?" It was Joe Scarborough. "You all right?" She sighed. "Yeah, just watching the footage." Joe pushed the door open, frowning. "Look, I know you like pushing people's buttons, but maybe that one was a bit much." Mika turned toward him. "Since when do we back off asking tough questions?" "I'm just saying. Something about her doesn't sit right." He hesitated, then gave a small shrug. "Get some rest. You look exhausted." Mika waited for the door to close behind him before turning back to her tablet. She replayed the footage again. Something flickered in the screen's reflection, a brief distortion, like a smudge across Melania's face. She rewound it, played it again. The smudge was still there. But this time, it moved. Mika's breath hitched. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but the smudge took shape, black eyes, hollow and vast, sinking into the First Lady's face. The moment she blinked, it was gone. Her hands trembled as she powered off the tablet. Just a glitch, just bad lighting. Still, as she left the studio, she couldn't shake the sensation that she was being watched. The incident started small. Her phone would vibrate in the dead of night, waking her, only for the screen to display no caller ID before the call disconnected. Mirrors started feeling wrong. She would catch glimpses of herself that didn't feel quite like her. At first, it was small things. The angle of her reflection seemed slightly off, her lips a shade paler than they should be. Then one evening, while washing her face, she looked up to see her reflection smiling at her, her own face smiling. She wasn't smiling. Mika staggered back, her hands trembling. The reflection didn't move, didn't correct itself. It only stared, lips curled upward in an expression she had never made. And then, just before she turned away, she could swear she saw something, someone, standing behind her in the mirror. A woman, tall, still. Her breath hitched. She spun around. Nothing. But the moment she looked back at the mirror, the woman was closer. A whisper brushed against Mika's ear. Some questions should not be asked. Mika stopped sleeping, stopped using mirrors. She installed extra locks on her doors, though she knew, deep down, they wouldn't help. Joe noticed. "You look like hell." Mika gave a brittle laugh. "Feel like it too." He frowned. "Mika, what's going on?" She wanted to tell him, but how could she? "I think Melania Trump is haunting me." He'd think she was losing it. Maybe she was. The final breaking point came one night as she sat in her office, editing notes for the morning broadcast. Her TV flickered to life on its own. Static filled the screen, the sound droning in a low, grating hum. Then a voice. Her voice. Mika's breath caught as she saw it. The footage, the interview. But it wasn't the interview as it had aired. On the screen, Melania was staring at the camera, at her, with eyes so black they swallowed the light. Her mouth opened, and in a voice both deep and distorted, she whispered, "You do not belong here." The screen shattered. Mika screamed, stumbling back. The lights in her office flickered violently before plunging into darkness. In the silence, she could hear something moving in the room with her. A breath, slow and measured. Then a whisper, just behind her ear. "Look." Mika turned. Melania stood in the shadows. Her figure was elongated, unnaturally still. Her skin was porcelain smooth and her lips stretched into an inhuman grin. The world tilted. Mika's vision blurred. The last thing she saw was Melania reaching forward, fingers pressing against her forehead. And then, nothing. The next morning, Mika didn't show up for work. Joe called her. No answer. Concerned, he drove to her apartment. Her door was unlocked. The place was in perfect order, nothing disturbed, except for the mirror in her bedroom, which had been smashed to pieces. Mika was gone. The police ruled it a disappearance. The media covered it briefly, then moved on. People speculated, but there were no answers, only questions. And some questions, after all, should never be asked.